was all theater. But the jury, well, two of them looked like they were buying it. One woman on the end even nodded sympathetically when Jenna mentioned building a home together. Mitch leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't worry. She's digging her own hole. Just wait." When it was his turn to cross-examine, Mitch stood and slowly walked toward the witness stand, holding a remote in one hand. "Miss Lockhart," he said, voice steady as ever. "How long did you say you lived on the plaintiff's property?" She straightened a little, sensing the trap but too far in to retreat. 2.5 years, she said. "And in that time," Mitch continued, "were you ever given any legal documentation that granted you ownership or partial ownership of the ranch?" She paused. "No, but no further comment," he said, clicking the remote. The screen behind him lit up with the freeze frame of Jenna handing Dale Weston that file folder at the auction lot. "Is this you, Miss Lockhart?" "Yes." "Is this your cousin entering the plaintiff's barnyard at 2:37 a.m. with bolt cutters?" Another click. "Yes, but I didn't, did you or did you not, in this next video, instruct Mr. Weston to process the auction under false ownership?" "That's out of context," she said, voice tightening. "Context is useful," Mitch replied. "Let's hear the audio." He clicked again. The courtroom fell silent as Jenna's voice echoed off the walls. "He doesn't check his email. Just list it under my name. It'll go through before he knows what happened." Gasps filled the room. One juror's mouth dropped open. The woman who had nodded sympathetically earlier suddenly crossed her arms. Jenna looked down, cheeks burning red. But Mitch wasn't done. "Miss Lockhart, are you aware that you are also listed in a 2019 police report in Redstone County for attempting to coerce another man into signing over partial property rights?" Her head jerked up. "That case was dropped. So you admit to being involved?" She froze. "No further questions," Mitch said. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit an amended claim based on new testimony and evidence presented here. Miss Lockhart has demonstrated a pattern of attempted real estate fraud, and we believe there is sufficient cause to include restitution demands totaling property damage, legal fees, and emotional distress." Jenna's lawyer stood up, stammering objections, but Judge Keener raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Brandley. We'll get there." And then came the twist. Something we'd held back for just the right moment. Mitch called me to the stand, and I walked slowly, letting the silence settle before I sat. He asked a few routine questions, which I answered clearly, until he pulled out one final document. "Tell the court what this is," he said, handing it to me. I looked down. "It's a copy of my family trust," I said. "It lists the ranch as protected under my grandfather's inheritance clause. It cannot be sold, split, or transferred without approval from both a trustee and a county supervisor. And has such approval ever been granted to the defendant?" "Never." Mitch nodded, then looked at the judge. "I'd also like to add that this document was filed with the county 12 years ago and supersedes any private claim Miss Lockhart may assert." He clicked the screen once more. The final image appeared. A county record stamped certificate of the trust, time-stamped and sealed. Judge Keener sat back in her chair, folded her hands, and let the silence thicken. When the verdict came, it was swift. The court found in my favor on every point. Jenna's claims were dismissed with prejudice. The auction house was ordered to issue a formal apology and pay damages. Jenna was hit with a court order preventing her from approaching within 500 feet of the ranch and faced separate charges related to trespassing, fraud, and attempted arson. But the most powerful moment wasn't the gavel hitting the bench. It was when I stood outside the courthouse, camera crews flashing and reporters yelling questions, and Jenna walked past me in handcuffs, eyes darting wildly, jaw clenched like she wanted to scream but knew it would only make things worse. Her lawyer trailed behind her, face pale and briefcase forgotten. And in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel proud. I just felt free. Like a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally dropped to the ground and shattered for good. I climbed into my truck, turned the key, and headed back to the ranch. There was still work to do, still fences to mend and fields to turn, but the land was mine again, not just legally, but spiritually. Jenna had tried to auction off my life. But I had walked into the crowd, called her bluff, and walked out with something no one could ever sell: peace. It was a strange kind of quiet that settled over the ranch in the days after the court ruling, not the peaceful kind you feel when everything's right in the world, but the kind that feels like the air is holding its breath, waiting to see if the storm really passed or just ducked behind the ridge for another run. The media had packed up their gear, the sheriff had finished his final sweep and delivered the restraining order himself, and even Duke seemed to stop growling at every gust of wind, but I still kept one eye on the tree line every morning and checked the cameras twice a day. Ricky stuck around longer than planned, not because he thought Jenna would come back, though either of us could say that was impossible, but because sometimes when you've been through a war, even a legal one, it takes a while to let your guard down. We spent those days fixing the broken things she left behind, not just the pipes she sabotaged or the fence she tried to cut through, but little things: the lock on the barn door that had started to stick, the back porch railing she had painted and left half-finished when things started turning cold between us, and even the flower bed near the kitchen window where she'd once planted something pretty and pink I never bothered to learn the name of. I dug it all up. Every root. Replaced it with wild flowers native to the soil that wouldn't wilt if you stopped pretending to love them. It felt like reclaiming the land all over again, this time from a ghost instead of a fire. But even ghosts have a way of whispering when you least expect it, and it wasn't long before one of those whispers arrived in the form of a certified letter. It came from a downtown law firm I didn't recognize, thick envelope, gold embossed return address, the kind meant to look expensive enough to scare you. I opened it at the kitchen table while Ricky poured coffee, and halfway through reading, I let out a slow, bitter laugh. Jenna had filed an appeal. Not to overturn the restraining order or the fraud charges, but to delay payment of damages, claiming financial hardship and requesting a stay of enforcement until she could re-establish housing and mental stability. She'd even attached a letter from a therapist claiming Jenna was experiencing severe emotional distress, and that being forced to pay restitution might lead to a breakdown. I tossed the letter on the table and stared at it while the coffee steamed in my hand. "She's trying to buy time," I muttered. Ricky didn't say anything at first, just looked out the window like he could see her hiding in the tree line again. Then he shrugged and said, "Let her. She's already lost. Buying time don't change the scoreboard." He was right. But it still burned. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. About closure. And something in me couldn't shake the feeling that as long as she was out there weaving new lies, I wasn't really done. Not yet. Then came the visit from one of the county board members, a man named Harris who'd known my family for decades and had the look of someone who spent more time with tractors than chairs. He knocked on the door just after noon one day, hat in hand, and said he'd been contacted anonymously about a potential land use violation involving my ranch. I raised an eyebrow. "Violation?" I asked. "Of what?" He shifted uncomfortably and said that someone had filed a report claiming that a portion of my fencing encroached on county-managed floodplain land, and that I might be in violation of state code regarding protected water easements. I nearly laughed. That fence had been in the same spot since before I was born. My grandfather built it. I even had an old aerial photo from the 80s that proved it. But someone wanted trouble. Someone was trying to rattle the cage. Harris made it clear he didn't believe the claim but said he was obligated to check it out. We walked the line together the next morning, measuring tape, GPS, drone footage, all of it matching the survey filed with the county a decade ago. The case was dismissed within hours. But the message was clear. Jenna might have lost the courtroom, but she was still grasping for strings to pull, still poking at the edges hoping something would fray. I kept records of everything. Every attempt. Every odd phone call. Even when someone started leaving trash on the side of my driveway, cans, broken mailboxes, once even a fake eviction notice with my name scrawled wrong in red ink, I logged it. Sheriff Clay said it was probably her, maybe even through someone else, but without direct proof, His hands were tied. So I waited. Watched. And rebuilt. Because at the end of the day, spite can't grow crops, and bitterness won't feed cattle. The land still needed tending. The fences still needed walking. And my peace, bruised as it was, needed restoring. Then, one evening near sunset, I got a call that froze the air around me. It was from a woman named Marlene, whose family owned a ranch 2 counties over. She said Jenna had shown up on their property claiming to be a land consultant, offering to help them auction off unused acreage for maximum return, and asking to see deeds and tax records to help evaluate options. Something about her didn't sit right, Marlene said, so she Googled the name Jenna had given, Jennifer Locke, and found the news article. She just wanted me to know. That night, I sat on the porch, Duke at my feet, and watched the sun bleed into the dirt like an old scar healing from the inside out. Jenna wasn't done playing her game, not by a long shot. But she was out in the open now. Her name was known. Her story public. And everywhere she went, people would ask questions she couldn't answer. It wasn't the clean victory I once imagined. But maybe that's not how these things end. Maybe you don't get one final slam of the door or a moment where everything just clicks into place. Maybe sometimes justice is quieter. Slower. A long trail ride through broken land until you realize the buzz in your chest has faded and the weight on your back has lightened. Ricky left the next morning, heading back to his family with a handshake that lingered and a grin that said he'd be back if anything stirred up again. I was alone now, but not vulnerable. I had rebuilt every part of this place she tried to poison. With my hands. With my people. And with truth. Jenna had tried to sell my life to strangers, burn my home, break my name. But all she managed to do was reveal who she really was. And who I still was underneath it all. I stood, stretched my back, and looked out across the field where the cattle grazed under a sky soft with the coming dark. The cameras blinked from their posts. The fence stood tall. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to watch my own back. Because the world was watching for me now. A few weeks after Ricky left, I hosted a barbecue on the ranch, not because I had something to prove, but because I needed to feel normal again, to see people laughing where there had once been silence, to fill the air with something other than tension and court dates. I invited neighbors, local ranchers, folks from the co-op, and even the sheriff's department. Clay showed up with a tub of potato salad and 2 kinds of cornbread, acting like it was just another day, even though I could tell he was keeping an eye on every car that pulled in. The smell of hickory smoke drifted across the pasture while kids ran around chasing dogs, and adults stood in little groups drinking sweet tea and talking about hay prices and weather. It was peaceful, genuine, and for a few hours, I forgot about Jenna completely. That is, until right around dusk, when a black sedan pulled up just beyond the last gravel strip of the driveway and idled with its lights off. The music quieted. Conversations thinned. I saw Clay reach for his belt without thinking, and Ricky, who'd surprised me by showing up with his youngest son, walked over with that same look he used to get in high school right before a fight broke out. I stepped forward first. Calm, steady, the way my grandfather taught me to walk through a pasture full of barbed wire and angry bulls. The door of the sedan opened slowly, and out stepped Jenna, dressed in all black like she was attending a funeral, maybe hoping to host one. She didn't look wild or screaming like before. She looked composed, like someone who had practiced their apology in front of a mirror for days. She held a folder under one arm and something that looked like a bouquet of flowers in the other. But I wasn't interested in performances anymore. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. She walked halfway up the path and stopped when she realized no one was going to meet her there. Then, with all the flair of someone who still thought the world owed her a spotlight, she cleared her throat and said she came to make amends. A few of the guests looked toward me, unsure if this was part of the entertainment or the beginning of another headline. I kept my voice even, quiet but clear. Jenna, you're violating a restraining order just by standing there. I suggest you get back in your car and keep driving. Her face twitched. Just enough to let me know she didn't come to apologize, she came to be seen.